Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel. Keisha here. So I'm really getting into this creative flow with YouTube, and I gotta tell you, it's so refreshing for me to be able to come on and create content for you and share. So thank you so much for watching, for all of your comments, for all of the likes, for subscribing to my channel. And if there's anything that you want me to discuss specifically, please be sure to drop me a request and let me know. So this video is going to be a little bit more casual, and it's so funny. In the process of like deciding whether or not I wanted to record another video, I was like, should I change my outfit? Should I put makeup on? Should I do something with my hair? And I was kind of going back and forth with myself about it, and then I realized that's all conditioning. Like it's fine to wear makeup if I feel like it. It's fine to look a certain way or dress a certain way if I feel like it. But if I'm feeling like I shouldn't not wear makeup or I shouldn't do a certain thing because I might be judged because of my appearance, then that's a clear signal to me that I need to just drop that, step out of the conditioning, be more authentic, and just turn the camera on and start talking. So it was just a really clear example of how conditioning affects us in so many ways, and how we have to really check in with ourselves and really ask why we're doing what we're doing sometimes. Is it coming from an authentic place of wanting to please yourself and make yourself happy? Or is it coming from a place of wanting to please others? And I don't wear makeup all the time, so it's not like a common thing that I do. I do it when I feel like it and I feel like looking a certain way. But I don't want to ever get into the habit of feeling like I have to wear makeup. You know what I mean? So I'm makeup free on this video. And today's topic was inspired by a post that I made this morning. I woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was just like, all of these words just wanted to come out of me. So I grabbed my phone and I just started writing and writing and writing. And I ended up making it into an Instagram post, but it was about rage, rage, the emotion. And I was thinking about how, as women, rage is just one of those things that we're not supposed to feel. We're not supposed to express it. It's considered inappropriate. And I think that because there are so many different emotions that we've been taught that we're not supposed to feel, it's not allowed, it's not okay. If you do feel a certain way, you have to brush it under the rug or get over it as quickly as possible. That really hinders us. That really stops us from being able to fully express ourselves. In a lot of ways, it stops us from being able to heal really important wounds. And it's just not great for your health to experience an emotion and not be able to process it or really feel it before releasing it. So that inspired this video, which is all about the importance of embracing your shadow. So there's been a lot of talk in the spiritual community. I guess maybe if you want to talk about the more modern spiritual community, just about, like love and light and all of these things. And I think that that's great. But what can often be neglected and left out of this love and light, high vibe conversation around spirituality is the importance of embracing your shadow side and integrating your shadow side with your light side in order to be a happy, healthy, whole, multi-dimensional woman. And I think learning to embrace your shadows is really critical in terms of your life path as well. Because if you're only focusing on the socially acceptable, people-pleasing, nice, polite version of you, and you're ignoring all of the others, the other 50% of who you are, how do you ever really get to know who you are and fully what you enjoy and what brings you pleasure and what you want to do with your life if you're neglecting a huge part of who you are? So I thought, let me film a video and talk a little bit about that. So for those of you who may not be familiar, your shadow self, this is like a psychological term, but it's become a little bit more common in recent years. But your shadow self or your shadow side is essentially all the parts of you, the characteristics of you that you were taught were inappropriate and unacceptable by other people. So this is conditioning that starts very early on in our lives. So for example, traditionally, if you have parents, they probably praised you whenever you said please and thank you, and you were polite and you washed your hands and you did all the nice things that they wanted you to do. But if you did something outside of that, something that they considered inappropriate, like if you threw a tantrum or you talked back or you were rude in some way that they perceived to be rude, or you were too loud, or you said no and had boundaries when they wanted you to do something, you ultimately were punished for that, or those parts of you were repressed in some way. Maybe you got put in time out, you got told that that wasn't okay, you got yelled at, you got reprimanded, whatever it was. So over the course of your childhood, you learned which behaviors were acceptable to your parents and caregivers and which behaviors were not. And the ones that were not acceptable were the ones that you repressed. And this becomes your shadow side or your shadow self. And the thing about the shadow self is, it's not necessarily that these characteristics are wrong or bad or that anything is wrong with them at all. It's just that we were taught that they were bad or wrong because the people who raised us didn't like them. And they likely didn't like them because they were also conditioned by their parents to be taught that those things were bad or wrong. But it's not necessarily like that they were bad or wrong. And so over the course of your life, you've been repressing certain characteristics of yourself. And for women, a lot of the time, those shadow self characteristics are you can't be selfish, you can't be mean, you can't be rude, you can't talk back. And the light acceptable side of you is the people pleasing side, the generous side, the part that takes care of other people, the nurturing side, right? One isn't necessarily better than the other. These are all just value judgments that other people impose upon you and beliefs that other people impose upon you that we take on to be our truth. And you get to a certain point where you've repressed the shadow side for so long that sometimes it will start to come out in little ways. And this is why we'll have like emotional outbursts, or something small will happen and we'll have some sort of an overreaction to it. Or we'll start doing certain things in secret and in hiding because we don't think that other people would find them acceptable. So sometimes we can almost start to live a double life. So all of these things can start to happen when we continue to repress our shadow. But as long as we repress the shadow side, we never fully integrate the shadow with the light. So we continue to carry on these wounds and beliefs that we're not good enough, that we're not lovable, that we're bad, that something's wrong with us, that we're not worthy. And so learning to embrace your shadow side, or all the parts of you that you were previously taught were negative or wrong, is an important part of your healing. And it's an important part of developing awareness as to who you really are when you look at the complete picture of who you are, not just what other people think are good or acceptable or lovable. So I hope that that explanation makes sense. But how this kind of ties into your career is, we often can find ourselves in careers that feel very suffocating, that don't really match our full personality or our true desires, because we're ignoring half of who we are. So if you have been this people pleaser, good girl your whole life, I really encourage you to start to explore and experiment more with your shadow side. If there are certain interests that you have that you feel like you can't explore because they're quote unquote taboo, well, says who? Like, you're an adult woman and you get to decide what you do with your own time. You get to decide what you like, what you don't like. You get to decide what you want to explore and experiment with. And you can rewrite your own rules. You can take the rules that were imposed upon you when you were a little girl and throw out the ones that don't really serve you anymore, and throw out the ones that feel restrictive and repressive and don't allow you to enjoy the fullness of life. So when we talk about human emotion, the spectrum of human emotion, I talked about the emotion of rage this morning because it's just one of those emotions that are considered taboo or inappropriate. We're not supposed to get angry as women. And even when we have a completely valid right to be angry, we're still accused of overreacting or being inappropriate, or, people can make you sometimes feel like you're crazy, you're irrational, you shouldn't feel that way. So part of integrating your shadow self with your visible and light self is letting yourself experience emotions that you were previously taught you weren't allowed to feel as well. And maybe I'll create a separate video about practices for embracing your shadow self, healing your shadow self, exploring your shadow self. But I know for me, I felt really bored and suffocated in my traditional career because, in the standard Western 9 to 5 culture, you have to dress a certain way, you have to wear work clothes, and, you have to have certain etiquette and you have to have a certain demeanor. There's a whole way of talking, there's a way of interacting with other people. The workplace oftentimes is very cold and sterile, and, it feels like sometimes if you're not in a career that's really aligned with you and that really allows you to showcase your skills or your personality completely, it can feel like you're playing a role, or like putting on a show and pretending that you're happy with what you're doing and pretending that you even care about what you're doing and what you're talking about. And so all of this pretending and forcing yourself to be a certain way and being inauthentic is stressful. It's really stressful on the mind, the body, and the spirit. So learning how to accept your shadow side and integrate your shadow side and be less concerned with offending people and hurting people and more concerned with taking care of yourself and being authentic is going to be really healthy for you. And again, just because you're authentic and embrace your shadows, it doesn't mean that you suddenly become this rude person who doesn't care about other people and you're doing all of this wild and crazy stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that you, again, are embracing parts of yourself that aren't necessarily always pretty or perfect or lovable by other people. But just because it's a part of yourself that isn't necessarily pretty and perfect, that doesn't mean that it's not worthy of being loved and seen and heard, not only by yourself, but other people as well. So I'm really curious to hear from you all what your thoughts are about that. Have you noticed that you do have a shadow side? There are certain parts of you as a woman that you're expected to pretend like it doesn't exist in order to be socially acceptable, in order to please other people or fit in with the traditional way of working and the traditional way of life. And I'm also curious, what do you think would be different if you started to embrace and acknowledge those characteristics a little bit more? Like, would you be more confident? Would you feel more certain? Would you feel like more of a badass? Would you feel like maybe more just complete in a way because you feel like all of you is acceptable and okay to be out in the light, as opposed to certain things you're just not supposed to do because it's bad and it's wrong and women don't do those kinds of things? I'm just really curious because I've been embracing my shadow quite a bit in the past couple of years, and of course there are going to be consequences to that. If someone is used to you acting a certain way and being a certain way and being a people pleaser and being a good girl, when you start to speak your truth more and you start to maybe dress the way you really want to dress, act the way you want to act, start doing things that are of interest to you that may not fit into the typical box that people are used to you behaving in or looking like or saying, you might get some backlash to that, because anytime we decide to be more authentic, there are always going to be people who are uncomfortable with it, either because they just don't like who we're becoming or because our authenticity is triggering them because they're not being authentic in their own lives. So that is also part of it. And if you can see that pushback or friction that might come up from you learning to embrace your shadow, you being more confident, more assertive, more authentic in your life and in your career, if you can embrace that, I think it can be a really fun and exciting time. It's as much as it can be uncomfortable, because deconditioning yourself can be uncomfortable. You're starting to have new habits and new ways of being. It can also be really fun and exciting because it's like a new chapter of your life, and you're getting the opportunity to create a life that's really more aligned with who you truly are, and you're no longer being the person that you were taught you were supposed to be. You get to learn about who you really are, and you get to be that and see how your true self functions in the world. So it can be really exciting. But that's it, my loves. I just wanted to hop on and share some thoughts that I had this morning. And I may do a podcast episode about this as well, because I think shadow integration is a huge part of figuring out what your life purpose is, what your soul purpose career is in living a more fulfilling life. Thank you so much for watching. If you love the content that I created for you today, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Be sure to leave me a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with at least one other woman that you think would find it helpful. I'll see you next time. Bye!